Hello, my friends, and welcome to MSP Unplugged. I'm your host, Rick Smith. This is the place to learn tips, tricks, and strategies to help you grow your IT service business. Whether you're a one-person shop or leading a team for the journey, this is the place for you. Let me introduce my co-host, the world famous, coming from the frozen tundra of Chicago right about now, Mr. Paco Lebron of ProdigyTeks. How are you today, sir?
Oh, today is actually a warm day, Mr. Smith. Today is right now at a nice balmy 35 degrees, and
Wow.
we are looking to possibly go ahead and see a high of 43 degrees. So it is our warmer day of the week. But Monday next week, we're going to be at 8 degrees with the night feeling at -3. So
Wow.
it's going to be
Wow.
good. And we may see some snow tomorrow. So that's what we got going on here in good old Chicago.
Wow. Yeah, we're in the mid-30s here in New Jersey. It's the first time I went out today and didn't feel like the wind was going to bite my ears off. It's normally so cold and so windy, but doing
And I'm
better.
one of them lazy ones that haven't taken down the Christmas lights yet. So today's the day for me to do all that. So,
God. I hate to say this, but I'm always early with my Christmas lights being up and down because they never come down. Well, the ones on the outside of the house, they're just
right.
white. They blend in, so they never come down.
See, mine are icicles, so I can't even mess with that. I wanted to buy, there's these ones called Govee, which like you could do multiple colors with those.
Mhm.
So we were going to install them this year and we just missed the sale for it. But, you could do like red and pink for Valentine's Day and like red, orange for Halloween and like all those type of whatever. So that's what I was hoping to do. But
gives you a real reason to have you have the lights up all year round, huh?
Exactly. But I do leave the clips inside the gutters that we
Mhm.
hang the lights on, and it drives my wife crazy. I just like, my bad.
I just leave them up. It makes it easy. So when the kids come home, I'm like, hey, the Christmas lights are up. Bing! I just hit the little button and they come on.
Now it's wild when people keep them on and they keep turning them on. Like I drove down the neighborhood the other day and I was like, why are people still turning these lights on? That's what's crazy to me.
You know what? That's funny because up until I think like last week, mines were still coming on, and the reason is they were on a timer, and I forgot to turn the timer on. So if I don't pay attention, the lights are on outside, and I didn't turn the timer off. So, but now they're off, and they'll stay off the rest of the year. Hopefully. But anyway, enough of the house reminiscing and the Christmas lights. Corey, who is our third person in the group, he is out today taking care of MSP stuff, so handling his business. So we'll miss Corey this week, but we'll see him next week, and hopefully everything is going smooth for him and the things he's doing today. But Paco, let's get started. Before we get started with today's topic, do you have a tip, trick, or strategy or story that you might want to share with us this week? Oh, look at that face.
I actually do. So, so we had an issue with a network earlier this week where we got a call saying, hey, center is down. There's no internet. We don't know what's going on. So, for us, visibility is always great. So we jumped into Overseer because we're still got that live for our locations, took a look and saw that the router and the modem was on. The switch was on, but none of the access points were on. So we were like, something weird's going on. Then the switch would keep recycling itself. So we ended up going over on site. And so my assumption was, I bet PoE is dead on on the switch there. And so essentially when we went on site, I took a look and I said, this is interesting. This is now the 8, maybe 6. I can't remember if it was 6 or 8. 24 port PoE Arachnus switch that I have had to replace in the last 4 months.
Wow.
So this must have been a manufacturing thing or whatever, because like I've replaced more switches of theirs that have the PoE has died than I care to admit. Now, normally for me to have to test something like that, you'd have to, mess around. You'd probably grab a laptop, you mess around with the voltage and stuff like that. But to jump on another one of our friends' podcasts to tool of choice. This guy, which looks a little different now, but as that tells you how old this is. But for those that don't know, this is a Net Ally Link Sprinter, formerly of Fluke. And so they're a little bit different now. I think they're now like a green shade, if I'm not mistaken, or some other type of color. They're no longer yellow, I don't believe. I was alluding to Marvin B over at the IT Business Podcast, a good friend here of the podcast. And so this is the Link Sprinter. I think it costs around $300 to $400. You could probably buy it used. Marvin has mentioned that, the more expensive Fluke gear, you probably don't want to buy used because, there's packages to like maintain it, update it, things like that. Some of the tools, cost as much as a small car, right? But depending on what you need, is worth it, right? And so, I implore you that, I know you may have a cable tester, but this thing here, and I'm not sure if you can see, can basically monitor not only if there's a link that can be established, but can you get DHCP? Can you get an IP applied to you? Can you ping out? Can you get out to the internet? But if you notice in the bottom there's a little thunderbolt that's right there. And what it does is it'll tell you if PoE is coming out of the switch or not, or if the device is getting PoE. So all I did was I plugged this bad boy up into the switch and there was no PoE. So I knew that the PoE died. So what took me in a matter of a minute, maybe even less, told me I was correct in this assumption of my problem. I put in 2 temporary switches. I ordered a USG 24 port Unify switch to replace at this location. And on we go to support the Fi on the Ubiquity network stack that we will be implementing for our clients. So we have quite a few of that networking equipment to put in place. We have our first network that we got to replace coming up here in the next couple of weeks that will be fully unified, along with all of the end-of-life routers that we have coming up to go through from there. So for any of you that are listening here, may have a lead on a surplus buyer of networking equipment, let me know, because I got a ton that I got to get rid of and figure out what I'm going to do with all this equipment, networking equipment from Renactus and Snap AV. So yeah, that's my tip. Invest in the tools to help automation and MSP efficiency. That's going to be your best bet. I can't tell you how many times this thing has saved me, and I bill that hour as I go through for a minute of my time. And I was able to go ahead and quote a switch, got a little margin on top with some of those fees, and it was a good day.
Folks, I can't tell you. I wish I had a recorder for every conversation we had about getting Paco to switch to Unify, and the vitriol that I received about Unify. And now look who's their favorite friend.
Look. Okay. I just want to say that the reason for the standoffish on Unify is obviously the old way of how they used to do things, from my understanding, from speaking to my peers. And then 2, I just didn't want to follow the rest. I had a good stack. I had a good opportunity. It worked great. And that's what we did at the time. It was affordable back in the day, almost 8 years ago. Not the case today. So
that's what he says. But, but again, it's like we talked about last week. You got to do what works for you, right? And at the time, that's what was working for you. And now it's not. And you've seen the light.
Or join the dark side, depending on who you talk to. But
I'm going to go really quick here. I had a hell of a day yesterday. You wake up, you got a plan. These are the things I'm going to do today. And then a phone call comes, or a ticket comes, or a message comes, or an alert comes, and your day goes to the left, and everything you planned on doing doesn't get touched. And
would you say that was a lot of unplanned work, Mr. Smith?
A lot of unplanned work. And a lot of it was really, it was, silly. We missed some things. We didn't, client missed some things. Now, I'll tell you this story real quick. We had a client. We use Hoodoo for our documentation. So Hoodoo does monitor when a domain's expiring. So, it'll tell you, and we have it set up to send us a ticket if the to send us a ticket 7 days before the to send us an email, an alert 7 days before the domain is expiring, because that means that the client hasn't renewed, and we just want to make sure they get it done. So we got this email which fired off a ticket which alerted the client, who the client didn't see the ticket. On our end we didn't follow up, but I knew from working inside of their domain that they had an auto renew. They had a credit card in file and an auto renew with GoDaddy, which is where their domain was. Now, as a practice, we do not manage and pay for domains. We let the client do that. And it's just a whole, if I get hit by a bus theory, I want them to have access to their domain, right? So I want them to own it, have access to it, and there's no question about it. Now, of course, you could say, well, what about all the other stuff? We give them all of the other credentials and tell them not to use it. We create normally 2 admin credentials for everything we have so that they can access it if ever need be. But the domains, we just don't mess with. Now, we do the hosting, but we don't do the domain. Anyway, I, in my mind, assumed this domain was in GoDaddy. Client calls yesterday, Rick, we can't get email. And I'm like, that's interesting. And we can't get email. We got email yesterday. All of a sudden we're not getting email or anything. And in my mind, I'm like, I wonder if they didn't renew their domain. I go to the domain. It's a 404. So, I type in their website. It's a 404. I'm like, oh God. Then I'm like, okay, you didn't renew your domain. I know the domain expired on the 13th, right? I knew that was the date because when we sent the ticket email, that's what we told them the date was, the 13th. So I go to GoDaddy, log into their account, and I don't see the domain. I'm like, what the hell? I know when a domain expires, they will give you I think it's 14 days or something before 14 or 21. If you don't have that domain insurance or whatever they call it, the domain protection, then they hold it for 30 days. And I know after that, it goes to auction. So I'm like, where the hell is the domain? Why isn't I here? I call GoDaddy. I spend an hour and a half back and forth with GoDaddy. This guy's trying to sell me the .net in the, I was like, dude, where is the domain? I don't see it anywhere. It just expired. So it can't have been sold. He's like, he goes through all this this goes back to that conversation you talked about, Paco, the other day about talking to a vendor and you want an answer for one thing and he's trying to work on another. So he is trying to sell me the .net of the domain and, the company's domain with an S on the end so that, he said, well, those are probably your best bets. We can do that for 10 years. That way you can make sure it's not, let me just book that right now. I said, dude, I need to find out where the current domain is. He goes through all. I said, can I speak to somebody else? And he's just still trying to sell me this domain. Finally, he looks. He goes, I don't think we have the domain. I don't think we ever had it. And I'm like, he says, so I can look it up and tell you where the domain is, who has the domain. I can't tell you who owns it, but I can tell you where it's parked. I said, I know where the name servers are because that's at us. Turns out, to make a short story long, it turns out I go back to the client. I start looking. I remember when this client, when the person who built their domain and had done it, when he built the domain, he had created the domain. The domain is under his company. He had made us a technical consultant. It was at another company. It wasn't at
GoDaddy.
Right. But he still owned it. So I had said to my client, I said, and this is funny, but it's not funny, but I didn't catch the joke until later. But I said to my client, I said, hey, we're going to have to call. I knew the person that said it to get access to see where this domain is because it's not in GoDaddy. And my client says, his partner, who's his wife, is right now at this point, she's stressed out. But he says, well, you can come to the office with some candles and we can hold a seance because he's dead. And I didn't catch it. I didn't catch what he said. And she just was like, guys, can we get serious? So anyway, I still had the login information. Like when I searched through, we had a login that we had for technical. So we went to the place where it actually was, made it a made it a renewed the domain. It's back up now, running and everything. But later on in the conversation, we're talking about just preventing, and then I bust out laughing in the middle of the conversation because after all
Now
of
the
this
joke
seriousness,
registered.
it just registered what he said. So it was really kind of funny, but at the same time, it was scary. And so now here's the issue we have. Because the domain was registered under him, you can't move it. I'm only a technical consultant. The owners of the domain are also under there as authorized users, but no one now, we cannot move this domain without permission from the technical owner of the domain. So there's we talked to customer support and they're like, there's really nothing. You got to contact his estate or whoever ran this business now to find out. So it's just a mess. But the moral of the story is we took for granted that because all this other stuff was in GoDaddy, I took for granted it was in GoDaddy. I knew it was a credit card in GoDaddy. So I was like, well, I don't know why I didn't renew.
Mm-hmm.
But we should have just double checked. So the moral of the story is always double check what you think you know. And then maybe the other part about this is double check your documentation, because we had the documentation saying the domain was at GoDaddy.
Yeah.
Which means, and the worst part about that, when I went to Keeper and looked, I saw where the domain was because we had saved our login for it. So it's just nuts. We just have to double check that stuff. So that's the moral of the story. But it was the seance thing was kind of funny afterwards, and it's just hilarious that I didn't catch it until because I'm stressed. I'm like, I'm hoping we didn't screw this up, but I knew it was, we purposely don't take domains for this exact reason.
Yeah. It's funny because we actually do the opposite. We actually push our clients to let us take it over because it helps prevent the unplanned work of this exact scenario where we handle the renewals, we put all the DNSSEC and all the securities features inside of it. And oftentimes it helps their whatever vendors that scan their domain for like posture and stuff like that, and things of that nature. But I think that the good point about there is that it sounds like that, automation for MSP efficiency would have saved the day for this topic here. So
exactly. So it's an interesting story, but let's move on to that. And that is, as Paco just alluded to, our topic for today is automation for MSP efficiency. We're going to talk about some of the tools and tips that we're using, planning on implementing to help us get a little more efficient in our MSP. So Paco, with that, I know you've been working hard on this for a long time, so I'll let you start it off.
Yeah, I think that, for if anyone who listened in last week, I talked about a couple of things or maybe pillars that we are trying to implement in there, right? And, we have 5 steps, and those are: make requirements less dumb, delete the part or process step, optimize, accelerate, and then automate. And so although automate is the last feature, it helps to kind of run through those 4 before you get into the automation piece. But I think that there's a lot of people that are not utilizing what they have for efficiency, right? And so the most important or the most easiest to kind of talk about first is leveraging your RMM. I think that a lot of us tend to, when you bring in a new computer, right? How many agents are you installing on a computer at a given time, right? You have your RMM, you have third-party applications, you have your own software that you're running, AV, EDR, backup program, the list goes on and on, DNS protection if you have that on the computer. And so, sometimes it could take you, takes about 5-10 minutes an installer, depending on what you're installing on there. But when you add it up, it all adds up, right? And so you go from an onboarding that you're onboarding a certain user for, what you thought would take 30 minutes, but the amount of time, how long it takes to download, the speed of the computer, you can be stuck there for about an hour and a half, 2 hours sometimes, depending on what you're trying to do, your syncing and things of that nature, right? So, with the RMM, one of the big automation pieces that, you should be taking advantage of, but I know that there are a lot of IT business owners out there that don't take advantage of this, is utilizing the PowerShell and scripting of the RMM. A lot of companies not only integrate with each other, but there is a lot of opportunities to run PowerShell scripts, batch scripts, or bash scripts, depending on the platform that you support, to implement a lot of the tools that you have. For example, for our RMM installer, we have Huntress that gets deployed. We have our third-party applications that get installed. And so really, when a client gets their computer, and we'll go into this in a bit on how do we automate the out-of-box experience that Windows provides and or Google, we will go ahead and have them install the RMM link. And the RMM link technically should be the only installer that they would run. And it should bring all our stuff in there, our remote apps, our remote software, things of that nature. And so once we see it in our dashboard, we let it do its thing. And the beautiful part about that is that you can monitor a dashboard now to see what scripts and what has deployed. And then if you have integrations, you have a dashboard you can monitor for that. Or you go to your respective dashboards for your systems and you can see that the items or the systems are there. So there's a lot of prep work that you can do beforehand, limiting your time with the client, because your clients are busy no matter what, especially for those that are new hires that they're trying to get certain things going on. And if you do this so many times, it eliminates the manual error of, oh, shoot, I forgot to install the Keeper extension, or, oh, I forgot to install this piece, or I forgot to enable BitLocker on the system, things of that nature. And so, utilizing the RMM in that way allows you to not only have installation of software, but also the configurations, which I led to right now, which is like BitLocker, power settings, things of that nature, so that it's just automated. It's a set of commands that happen. You can do your quality checks and then you can move on, versus you having to remember to do everything, helping automate and making your at least device onboardings a little bit more efficient.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And it saves, again, the whole purpose of all this is time, right? Again, saving you the time, the effort of, again, one of the things you said is key is you trying to do it manually and forget to do certain things, right? Or, so that's probably the key in all of that is making sure that you basically script out your script, right? To know exactly what's going where. We are, that is the second step in this. And the way I look at it, when I focus a lot on the automation part of what we're doing now, we focus a lot on the first step before you get to automating all this on the machines is the automation of the onboarding itself. And what I mean by that is getting all the information that you need from the customer, from the client, making sure they have everything they need to understand what's coming, what's changing. So as a lot of I talk about this a lot. I am a very big fan of the Go High Level CRM. I've look at Paco's face, but anyway, I've spent a lot of time in it, and I've learned, I've learned to use it a lot to our advantage. So we onboard VoIP clients now. We send them a information sheet. Then we send them a form that they fill out that helps us determine how they want their voicemail, their system set up. We do the same thing when we the data we collect for for new clients and all that they need, we do it there first, and then we push it out. Now, unfortunately for us, at this point, it's a two-step process. And the only reason that is because we can't get our CRM at this point to talk to our RMM, right? So some of the data we collect from, they don't have Zapier yet. It's coming, but they don't have it yet. What are you about to say?
Super ops, you better get on it.
Yeah, thank you. Now I did ask the question. They pointed out that they do have a Zapier. They're working on a Zapier integration coming up. So that should help. That should help the process. But the bottom line, again, it goes back to everything we talked about. You need to have the right information in order to create the right situation. So we needed to go back first to figure out what we actually need to onboard a client. You ever, if you've done this, a lot of us have onboarded, 20 years, 10 years, however long you've been in your business, 1 year, and you have a process for doing things, but you sometimes realize, hey, I missed this, I forgot that, I didn't do this. So we broke it back, looking at it. We used our RMM to tell us exactly what information goes in that, that we have in there. And then that leads us back, and the PSA as well, I'm sorry. And that leads us back to the questions we need to ask the client and the setup we need to do for to start the onboarding process to get to the point where Paco talked about actually getting everything deployed on the machines. Because there's a whole host of things that we need on the other end of this. Who do we talk to when there's an issue? Who do we go to if we need to get something approved? Is it the owner? Is it the manager? Who's authorized to tell us that we can buy things? Who can, how do you want these tickets to flow? Does the owner want a copy of every ticket? We have 2 clients that actually the owner wants to be CC'd on every ticket that comes in. So we have to add them to that. It's just questions like that, things like that. We need to know. So we ask all of these upfront questions. We need a point of contact. We need a secondary point of contact. We need a cell phone number in case there's an emergency and we can't reach you at the office, or we need to text you, whatever the case may be. We have this list of questions that the client, we basically send them this link. They fill it all out. It fills itself out and go high level. We can print it out and we can use it then to fill out what we need in the RMM, and it sets us up. So that is part of the process of, I guess you would call, of the automation. And I'll just say this: we're doing this in 3 phases, right? There's three sets of automations you need to have. You need to have them in your own business for how you do things. You need to have it in your customer's business for how you need to have it for how you deal with your customers, how you deal with your business itself, and then how you deal with your vendors. There should be some kind of combination of those, some set of documentation, some set of automation to help you receive information, to give information, in order for you to really to save yourself some time and some headache. Kind of like the story I told earlier today. If we'd had some automation to tell us that they're not in GoDaddy, or we read the information, they're not in GoDaddy, it would have saved us some headache. But again, it's still a work in progress. But I think automation is for the main thing is for a time saver, and it's also for the elimination or decline of unplanned work, as Paco says all the time.
Yeah, I mean, exactly like what Rick said, right? However, you have to understand that, from everything you just heard Rick say, you probably just said, oh, well, F that. Like, that's very overwhelming to have to try and put all of these things into place when you have nothing, right? And so the idea here is to try and make sure that you want to prepare and plan before you execute, right? So from what Rick mentioned, obviously from top down, it's best to document all of these things, but don't feel like you have to do it all at once or that it has to happen in that order, right? As long as you've prepared a lot of that, you take it one bite at a time, as long as you have the throughput of what you want to do. Perfect example. He mentioned, hey, I wish there was a way for us to have remembered to audit our documentation, right? Now, Rick is relying on memory, I would imagine, right? Whereas the PSA could help with that automation of creating a ticket, which is what we have on our side. Is we have a monthly ticket that gets created to say, hey, audit all the machines, patching for all the servers. Make sure every year we audit all of our UPSs and make sure that the batteries are replaced. We go ahead and audit all of our licensing every X amount of days. So there are ways to automate, right? That doesn't necessarily have to be a webhook, PowerShell, things of that nature. It could just be simple tasks that can be created for you. For example, if you're developing a project, inside of SuperOps, we have the ability of creating a run book that will create tasks for the team. So now there's no question of who's ordering this license, when are they supposed to do it by, who's supposed to do what. Now everyone understands that here's the time frame, here's what to do. And now that we have like a bulk of the automation done, now we can refine. And so how do we get someone who logs into their computer, an out of box experience where they don't have to contact us? You get a ticket that gets reported and says, hey, I have, the laptop's not getting charged like it used to, and the battery's not really up to snuff like it used to be. Can you take a look? There are automations that you can put in place for those, where now an admin can click a button versus escalating it to a ticket to a level 2 or level 1 for them to run all these scripts and things of that nature. Having this all kind of prepped and planned out will help you in the long run as well. But understand that, you want to do it piece by piece, and whatever is going to be easiest for you for what you have, right? For us, we struggle with the APIs and webhooks because we've made the business decision to use Power Automate for all of our webhooks and things of that nature, although Zapier is more popular. So, how do you battle that if you've put some of your things in that camp? Or are you going to split between two and make sure that your documentation is done properly, right? It's all about how do you automate for efficiency. That's the big key about this, is that how do you make sure that you don't just have automation for the sake of automation, which is why I go back to those 4 other items that I mentioned: is delete the process, make sure that requirements are less dumb, accelerate, and then you have the ability to then go and automate what you have currently right now. Because you necessarily don't have to automate 12 steps when really you can get it done in 6, right? And so that's the big piece of being able to prep it and write it down. Me and Rick are fans of whiteboards. That's what we do all the time and write it all out. I just had written up a whole new employee onboarding that I tried to piece together as best as possible. But sometimes trying to do the whole process, you get stuck in one place and you're like, well, I don't want to worry about it. But there are other components that you can kind of put together, so when it is ready, it can be assembled and not as overwhelming as this whole project that you may have moving forward.
Yeah, and I think, going back to what you said, I think what we need to keep in mind too is everything is a living document, right? Meaning it can change, it can be altered, it can be added to or taken away from, right? So when we talk about all of these are things that, when I talk about the automation that we're doing or the steps we're taking, a lot of it for me is some things are completed, or quote unquote completed enough to be in production. Other things are a work in progress, right? And everything is subject to change. So we've added now, the situation with the domains. That's something I went right into now to make sure that it's something we double check now, right? So now we've created here's where the domain is registered, and now we're going to update, even though Hoodoo tells us when the domain expires, we're going to update it in the PSA as well, so that it is there, so that it is not a surprise when this happens. So my point is, as Paco was saying, none of this has to be etched in stone, right? It's all on an eraser board where you can erase it or replace it, or put things in between it, because you should always be adapting. It's like I said, when we start something now, we plan, we execute, and then we review, right? And then we make and change again, and redo the planning, add some things into the new execution, and continue to review, because it's a cycle. And to get things, you're never going to get it quote unquote perfect. You will get it well, you will get it you'll get it to increase your efficiency, but there will always be things that you'll later on, because you never know what comes up. So you'll add steps to it later, or you'll find some steps that you have in your system are antiquated because they were replaced by other things. So you're always going to be working to, you're always going to be making changes. So just keep in mind that whatever you're doing, your automation, your documentation, it's a live process that's always subject to change.
Yeah. And I think that it's big to understand that, where you start from this is that, the way that you are viewing this episode is, all right, what are the tools and tips, right? And how can you get better at your efficiency and automation? But if you don't write down what your problems are, or what is it that's a pain in the butt for you, you're never going to be able to automate the things that you hate to do, or the things you hate to happen, right? On the flip side, if you're leading a team, your job as the one leading the ship, right, and steering where this thing is going to go, is you have to figure out, all right, what's a pain for your team right now, and what is it that they're struggling with that they always have to go to you for, and how do you break that out? Because there's a joke that I always tend to say is that I know where the mines are buried. I replaced that word minds with different other things, but you know where everything is. And sometimes, to prevent unplanned work, you sometimes set up your team for failure because you implemented something that was just one-off for one client and you didn't document it on time, or you did something so long ago for someone and now it's come up and they don't know what to do, right? Or in empowering them to understand that they can make a decision on their own with the right tools, right? And so being able to understand where to start will help you with that automation and efficiency. And I've known MSPs that have spent well over 2-3 years to just get the fundamentals and the foundations in their automation down to a point, right? That's why there's such small teams that are making such big strides, because they understand what they're trying to do. They understand what they're trying to go through forward with. For us, again, our automation for networking at the time was utilizing Overseer Pro and allowing us to monitor the network and getting the alerting and understanding there. But there were limitations to that, right? Now we're moving to a solution that has much more information, has a lot more ability to provide us a bigger picture. And now we're adjusting to help with that automation of what we have. Where you were often will change. And as Rick said, as that living document, you have to understand that things change too. And so being able to prepare for that will allow you for things of that nature. So again, we've mentioned obviously the PSA, we've mentioned being able to use PowerShell scripting and things of that nature. But there are tools, right, that will allow you to be efficient and allow you to be a little bit easier to do what you need to do for those things. And so, one of them for us on a security basis is Octiga. Octiga allows us to automate the baselines that we want for our clients. So we don't have to go one by one and manually have to set it. It's one configuration that is documented, that has a dashboard that then applies to all of our clients. So sometimes you can leverage tools for these things, but oftentimes you don't necessarily need a new tool every time you want to get something done, because you probably have something that can get the job done. And then when the resources and the time calls for it, you can obviously level up and get to that point as well. Rick, any tools that has been allowing you to get things going automated, or you looking into getting automated?
Well, yeah, I mean, we use pretty much some of the same things. Like, I use Octiga as well. Thanks to Corey, put us onto that, and that works very well. I would say, leverage figure out. I guess this is the approach we took with this, right? And we're still taking. Figure out where you live, and what I mean is what places, what tools or applications you live in every day as an MSP to run your business. Where do you live? Right. Now, a lot of people say I live in the RMM PSA. I live in the whatever I use in the Microsoft Sphere to manage security. Wherever you live, figure out where you live where you spend the bulk of your time and where the majority of your information is, right? And then figure out, how can I get everything else to come there?
Mhm.
Some of that will work, right? Some of it won't. But if you can figure out, because we all have, I don't know what the last estimation was, but I would say at minimum, everyone uses probably 10 different applications or tools to run their MSP. And this is outside of a QuickBooks or, things like that for finance. And I'm talking just stuff that we use every day to manage our business and manage our clients to make sure everything is working right. Right. So I would guesstimate it's at least 10, and maybe off, or, off a little bit, up or down a few. But so where do we spend the most time? Where's most of the information go? And how can we get those other 9 tools into that into that place, right? So a lot of a lot of PSAs, RMMs, have integrations with other some of those other applications. So you can bring that information in, right? That'll cut you down on a few if you use those, if they work for you. And then there's tools like we use Zapier to send information from one place to the other. Sometimes because there's no integration, we have to do what we call hop. So we have to hop it from one place to the next and then get it there. It seems a little antiquated, but at the same time, if it's going to save me a few minutes, or save us, save someone a few minutes to get the right information to the right place, then we'll take the time to automate it. Doesn't mean, and it's never sometimes perfect. And sometimes that automation is is manual. You know what I mean? It's you or an employee or someone being responsible for getting information from one place to the next. But the bottom line is we try to use as much of the integration that the place we live in the most, which is our PSA RMM. We try to use as much of that to integrate with the other tools we use, and where that doesn't work, we find ways to get it there other ways, or not, but we can knock down let's just say 10 applications being used to like 3 to 5. And if we can just do that, that makes the day easier, because now you're not jumping from place to place, and all the information you need is in a certain space for you. So I think that is more so maybe the steps we take rather than the actual tools. But I would say integrations, however you can find them. And then there's I've talked to people who have people, or who themselves are brilliant with using APIs, and they've created some outlandish, outrageously great integrations themselves by using API. So I would say if you have the skills or ability to do that, or someone who can, that might be another quote unquote tool to use to help you get information to where you need it to be.
Yep. Can agree even further to what you had mentioned for there. I think that for those that look for the automation tools, obviously you want to do your research on those specific tools, because sometimes, you're linking things together that oftentimes, you're exposing X amount of data. Just want to make sure that the one company having access to the other is valid. Make sure that, if it's a proper PSA or RMM, they'll have a way to quality control the API access for any type of unauthorized access, and things of that nature. But most importantly, I think that you need to figure out, as Rick mentioned, your core, right, on whatever you're trying to automate. He mentioned, all right, MSP stack, PSA RMM, and wrapping it around in CRM and combining it all inside of that platform or platforms if you have a CRM and a PSA separately. When you're talking about a small business or a client of yours, it's gone of the day where you have to worry about the device. Your core is now the identity of your client. And then what wraps around the identity? Is it going to be Microsoft? Is it going to be Google? Is it going to be a third party, such as OneLogin or Jump Cloud or things of that nature, and tying them all inside of the identity and then feeding into that proper system of place? Because then you get into the cool stuff, right? Now you'd be able to get into, all right, what deployments can I automate inside of my devices and attach to the identity. I can use Microsoft Intune, and Microsoft Intune has obviously the group policies you normally would have on a normal server. A lot more. I don't know if it's expanded to as much of what you can do on a server for local AD, but the group policies are damn near close, in my opinion, for a lot of the stuff that you need to do cloud wise. You then have those that, you know, if you're trying to incorporate different devices that are outside of the Microsoft system. So, you know, if you're on the Microsoft side of the house or on the Google side of the house, you can manage iOS devices, you can manage Android devices, things of that nature. You can even, I don't know if you all know this, but you can manage Windows devices with Google Workspace. And so in a similar fashion, it's not, in my opinion, it's not as robust as what Microsoft Intune has. But, you know, in Google Workspace, there is a device management where a person can log into a Windows device with a Google Workspace email, and it will create the account for them. Now, it won't have a lot of the syncing and things of that nature that you would normally have, into the base of the system, but it'll log in, it'll create a local account for Google, it'll sync all the Google services involved. And their only prerequisite is to make sure you have Google Chrome and this Google Windows credentials installed, and you'll have the little Google icon and you can log in and things of that nature. But it allows you to manage devices as well. You can add an MDM. So if you have Apple Business Manager, which is your first step in managing Apple devices, go to Apple Business Manager, register for an account. You can now upload MDM servers, and MDM meaning mobile device management. And then now you can manage your iPhones, iPads, whatever iOS devices you want, where you originally could not offer it because you needed a third-party software that may have cost more resources, but now can be all implemented inside of the system there for both personal and corporate. But again, you can't implement a lot of these automations until you've prepped, you've gone ahead and figured out who are your cores, and then revolving around that so that you can make sure that what you automate is not automating dumb stuff. You make sure that you make it as simple as possible so that when the automation does occur, there's less likely to have, what is that, Rick? Unplanned work.
Unplanned work. Yes, sir. So I think we probably beat this up a little bit and we're going to wrap up here. But I think if I had to sum up, I would think, you know, one of the things is figure out where you're going, what you're trying to do. Again, like I say, where you live. How can you mesh those things together? And remember, it takes time. This is not easy, and it's again, remember, it's a living document. It's a living process. So I don't expect, I don't come here telling anyone just, you can just knock this out or it's easy to do, because it's not. It takes some time, it takes some effort, it takes some knowledge. You need to understand. Like I say, I think the best way I'll say this, and this is from my own personal experience, is document your mistakes, right? Document your wrongs, document your unplanned work that comes out. How could I have done this better? Those will help you create your processes that you're trying to fix. The other part of this, I'll say, is your tools tell you a lot of information, particularly your RMM and PSA. When you look at your tickets, when you look at your, all the things that go into there, they tell a story, right? They tell a story of efficiency. They tell a story of inefficiency. They tell a story of what works, and they tell a story of what doesn't work. What you have to do now is take that information, be honest about it, and turn that into something that's more of an efficient way of doing things. I guess that's the best way I could sum it up. Paco, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you mentioned is documenting the times you get frustrated or something that happened in a way that you didn't like it. I would even go down to say as simple as writing it in a Word document, save it as whatever it is that the issue is, and dump it in SharePoint or OneDrive, because you may not be able to get it to it then, but when you have enough in the folder, you'll start to realize there's a lot of stuff in here.
Right.
And if you have the ability or help, someone can come along that can help you. Like for me, I had to bring in John Dubinsky to help me out with a lot of these things. And SharePoint and OneDrive has a searching capability to search not only the titles, but the contents of the documents you wrote. So you can write whatever it is that you want at the time and not even worry about formatting. And you can pull out the times that you had these issues, look at what happened, and prepare yourself to help address those items. That's what I would implore. And you can do sticky notes as well. If you know what I mean by sticky notes, you'll read the Phoenix project. There's like this big wall that they put all the issues and plans for what they have from there. So something for you to think to get a little bit of non-digital to help clear your brain.
For all you kids out there, that requires you use one of these.
That's a pen. I'm trying to find my sticky notes. I'm not talking about the sticky notes on Windows either.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly why I said you use one of these. But yeah, I think with that, Paco, we'll wrap up for the day, for the week, excuse me. We do invite you to join us each week. You can catch us. The video podcast is on youtube.com/MSP Unplugged. Do us a favor, guys. Like, subscribe, hit the notification button to be notified whenever a new episode is available. You can also catch us on the go. You can catch us on Spotify, Amazon Music. What's the other one?
Apple Podcast.
Yeah. Just to name a few. We're on a lot of them. Stay tuned though. We do have some announcements coming up in the next couple of weeks. Some things we're really excited about. So stick with us. And again, we appreciate you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on MSP Unplugged.